People who have technically died and were brought back to life. What was the experience like? I was in the shower, rinsing out my hair, when the next thing I remember is my wife screaming my name. I had blacked out and fallen out of the shower and smashed my face against the toilet. Luckily, all I have is pain in my face and a couple of wounds that were glued together in the emergency room, a swollen knee, and a good deal of blood to clean up in the bathroom now. My wife heard me mumbling in the bathroom and went to check up on me. As soon as she touched the doorknob, she heard me slam into the toilet. When she entered, she found my legs still in the shower, my arms limp at my sides, and the left side of my face smashed into the toilet seat with blood pouring out. She came over to help me get up, but I was dead weight. She called for me and looked at my face. What looked back at her was a dead blank stare. She screamed and slapped me a few times to try to get me awake. When that did not work, she raced to her phone to call for help. When she returned, I had suddenly regained consciousness and was struggling to get out of the bathroom while coughing out blood. I was in the dead state for at least 3 minutes, if not longer, due to how long I figure it took for her to register that something was really wrong and race to the phone. My wife says when she first found me, I had no heartbeat and was not breathing for about 3 to 4 minutes. Also, she and the paramedics said I had a grey-blue tint to my skin. Paramedics kept asking if I was usually that pale. I did not break any bones. I have never broken any of my bones oddly. No concussion and no other damage. My blood pressure was normal while lying down, but I had a 20-point drop while sitting and was under 80 while standing during the paramedics tests. I had about a quart of blood loss as well. During the time while I was blacked out, I was not in this world. I cannot go into much detail, but I do remember that I was off somewhere and could hear my wife screaming for me, and I kind of whooshed back into my body. This is literally one of my worst fears. I'm in the shower when nobody else is home and I slip and fall. I'm always so insanely cautious in the shower, and all of you guys should be too. There are so many pointy ends and hard things to hit your head on in there. Be careful, guys. This wasn't me, but it happened to my father when he was young. His house was situated between several hills at the bottom of a bowl-shaped little valley. He'd often ride his bike up the streets and then cruise down the hills towards his house in the middle to pick up speed. His parents owned an old station wagon with those metal luggage racks on the roof, and typically they had it parked in the garage, but for some reason, that day it was parked along the street in front of the house. My father was coming down the street perpendicular to his house. Before he could stop in time, he smashed into the side of the station wagon, flipped over the top, and tore open most of his back on the rack before falling off the other side in the gravel. His mother saw what happened from the window and immediately called the ambulance. But when they arrived on the scene, they pronounced him dead. When I've asked my dad what he remembers from being dead, he remembers light and not really feeling scared or anything like that. It was just very calm and white. Before he came back, he heard a whisper that his work wasn't done yet, and then he came back, after being clinically dead for about 5 minutes. He went on to live his life and is doing fine with no ill effects. I guess we can only hope that going out like this is what it really feels like. I've heard a lot of other stories, not from this thread, saying that you pretty much feel 100% at peace, and you just kind of accept that it is your curtain call. There really wasn't an experience, honestly. It was like being asleep. I was burned fairly badly back in January, and in an immense amount of pain. I was taken to a hospital, and they gave me a ton of drugs, but failed to hook me up to a heart monitor. Well, my heart soon stopped. I was dead for between 3 and 5 minutes before they were able to bring me back. My mother, who was in the room with me, said I was sitting up in the bed talking to her like normal, when all of a sudden I closed my eyes and fell backwards before convulsing. She described it as like the girl in The Exorcism. She went to go get the staff, and when they came back, apparently I was dead. I don't remember sitting up and talking to my mother, or dying. I do remember waking up. They had shoved a tube down my throat. I put my arms up and tried to fight them off before they grabbed them and strapped me down. I almost drowned once. I had a faulty scuba tank, and the weather was really bad. The boat came over to collect me and rode a wave which dropped it straight onto my head. Between that, the weight of the equipment and the current, I became trapped under the boat. It was like falling asleep in the cinema or on a long car ride. You can feel yourself nodding off, but you really don't want to. Your eyelids are heavy, but you keep fighting it. You fight it and you fight, but eventually sleep defeats you. And then you wake up, but I'm not actually sure if you were asleep or not. The only way I can describe it is that you were nodding off, and now the movie credits are rolling, and you are in a different place than when you were falling asleep. I saw no light or any evidence of anything. I just fell asleep, and then I woke up. But I should also state that I didn't actually die. When they pulled me up, I had a very faint pulse, so I had only blacked out. But I was pretty bloody close. I got hit really hard in the head with a baseball. The doctors figured it was going about 140 kilometers per hour. My heart stopped, and brain activity basically went to nothing. From the 4 or so minutes I was dead. I can remember that I had never felt so at peace before in my life. It was like going to sleep, really. Minus the dreams, just peace. I came back on the way to the hospital with some sort of emergency incision on my head. I don't know what exactly happened after that. The doctors said I had brain damage from where my skull fractured into my brain, and now, here I am today with a really crappy memory. At least now I can say part of my skull is titanium. Always a positive side to every situation. Hey, at least if this guy ever gets in a fight, he can headbutt somebody and automatically win. Plus, there are probably tons of other useful things you can use a metal head for. There's a positive side to every situation indeed. My grandmother was very ill in the hospital, and her heart stopped for about 3 minutes. She said it was like a dream you have when you're just waking up, where reality and dreams blend together. She was in a room with lots of people from her past, all long since dead or gone away. My grandfather, who died 20 years ago, tried to lead her towards a door, but the nurse from the hospital appeared, said she's not ready to go, took her hand, and then the dream ended. My grandmother said she wished the nurse had let her go with my grandfather. It made me feel very guilty, because I was the one who decided they should try and revive her rather than letting her die. She doesn't know, and I don't think I'll ever tell her. This is the type of story right here that makes me think most of these near-death experiences are really just people dreaming in their unconscious state. I could be totally wrong, and I have my own personal story that debunks this a little bit, but I'll get to that later. Don't worry, friends. When you close your eyes, it'll be sleep, and you'll wake up to this exact same thing. Think of it this way: the appearance of this universe isn't the first. It's happened an infinite number of times before this, and it will continue to happen an infinite number of times after this moment. The energy will be dispersed in the exact same way each time, and so you will be conscious. The fact that time isn't a spatial dimension, it's an illusory dimension, means you aren't this consciousness this time. You are simply this consciousness. You are in the act of living forever. This is a really cool theory and really makes you think, especially if you aren't super religious. I'd need a bit more convincing that this could be possible, but it's definitely an intriguing take on the wildly complex and endless subject that is death. Without giving too much information, I have a condition that causes my blood pressure to drop very suddenly, usually resulting in passing out. While in the hospital having tests done, I had an episode and I was clinically unalive for about 90 seconds. I wish I could say that I saw something, but it felt just like normal sleep to me. Waking up, however, was anything but normal. I felt my brain reboot itself. It's hard to explain, but here's how the experience went for me. Everything is black, not the color. It was similar to what blind people see, nothingness. I was awake, but not at the same time. I had thoughts, but they were ideas and concepts. I couldn't think in words. I wasn't awake enough to be afraid. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't feel actual fear yet. Then, my hearing kicked in. It sounds just like in the movies. It went from silence to small ringing and muffled voices to sudden clarity in about 2 seconds' time. I heard the nurses yelling my name. At the same time, I felt my body again. It was like the feeling after you realize your foot has been asleep, but for my whole body. Then, consciousness. I suddenly began thinking normally again. I realized what had happened, opened my eyes, and of course started freaking the hell out. Let me tell you, few things will ruin your day faster than waking up from what you know was not sleep. and hearing your nurse screaming flatline into a phone. I'm fine now. The whole experience made me realize how fragile we are as humans and how precious our time is because of it. I recently overcame mental issues, and my experience that day has given me something to hold on to when I feel myself slipping back down. Life is amazing. We take it for granted. Be happy and make other people happy the best you can. Thanks for reading, you wonderful internet stranger. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. I haven't experienced anything like this, but just from hearing other people's stories, it really seems like what people are experiencing is just a really intense, vivid dream, because they aren't fully unalive. Their brain is still functioning and interpreting the person's surroundings while they are out. My opinion is that we'll never fully know what it's like to be unalive. I know a lot of people fear the end, but even if nothing happens, I feel at peace with that, because you won't be able to consciously experience that feeling of not existing. I'm curious to hear the more religious perspective on this in the comments below, so please let us know. Before I go, I wanted to provide my own story about this. This is from my mom, who is a bit more religious, so you can interpret it however you want. When my mom was in her 20s, she had a miscarriage. She and my biological dad had come up with a name for the child before she had the miscarriage. They came up with Michelle. She never told anybody about the name she came up with because it made her sad. Well, fast forward to 20 years later, and my aunt is in the hospital succumbing to cancer. My mom was in the room when she passed away. In her final moments, my aunt said, "I see Michelle in front of me. She is so beautiful and has grown into a wonderful adult." Not only did she know the name, she was also seeing Michelle at the age she would have been if she were still alive. My mom started freaking out because she obviously never told anybody about the name. So this is a little different than the other posts, and just wanted to share that to see what you guys think. Let me know in the comments, and I love reading your guys' answers to these questions, so don't hesitate to share.